And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're talking about the most recent contract update around Josh Giddey. We're also talking about the most recent trade buzz around Johnathan Kuminga and Ayo Dosunmu. And so before we go ahead and we jump into that, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it, and let's start with the latest here around Josh Giddey. And so if you have not got a chance to see this, this is on Clutch Points. This article is written by Brett Siegel, an NBA insider and a writer that covers the NBA. And so within this article, he's talking about several different topics and just talking about what he's hearing around certain teams coming out of Summer League. And so he mentions the Chicago Bulls twice. He talks about Josh Giddey and the current contract situation. Next, he talks about Johnathan Kuminga, the Golden State Warriors, their current sign and trade situation here, maybe with the Chicago Bulls. And he mentions Ayo Dosunmu. And so let's go ahead and start with the latest around Josh Giddey. And so here is what Brett Siegel had to say. He says that no progress has been made between Josh Giddey and the Chicago Bulls on a new deal in restricted free agency. League sources said the two sides met at NBA Summer League in Las Vegas, where Giddey and his camp made it clear they want a contract similar to that of Jalen Suggs, 5-year, $150 million, and Emmanuel Quickley, 5-year, $162 million, and have not come down from their $30 million annual average value asking price. Now, key point here, it says that the Bulls have not offered more than a 4-year contract in the $20 million per year range. However, the two sides are expected to reunite and negotiate and find common ground on a new deal this summer. No team outside of Chicago has expressed legitimate interest in Giddey due to his contract demands. All right, so let's start at the top of this. And so the first thing is that it's lining up with what we heard with Jake L. Fisher, and it's also lining up with some other reports that we're starting to hear here. And so, the first thing that you're seeing is that 30 million annual average. That seems to be something that continues to be talked about, with Giddey and his camp making it clear that they want that. We've heard Jalen Suggs' name before as far as mentioned as an example on a contract. Depending on the day, you'll hear Emmanuel Quickley from time to time. I know that was something that was talked about initially during the season here. And so that lines up. Then when you look at the fact that it talks about the Bulls and Giddey meeting in Las Vegas, we've heard that as well. And then, when we hear that there's no progress that has been made, we continue to keep hearing that. But I think what we find interesting is just how far the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey could really be apart, because when you're looking at the 4 years at $20 million, that is only 80 million. And so if you're looking for 150 million at 5, that is a big difference here. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how this thing ultimately shakes out. And I do like the fact that, both sides continue to keep meeting here. I think that is an encouraging sign, for Chicago Bulls fans that want to see this thing get done. So it looks like that, they're going to find a common ground at some point. And really, ultimately, I think that it's going to have to be a common ground that they're going to have to find, because at the end of the article, it said that no other team outside of Chicago has really expressed interest, which leaves just Josh Giddey and the Chicago Bulls here. And so, the question is, what is this ultimately going to look like here? Is this something where the Bulls and Josh Giddey can come to a middle ground, say on 25 million per? I mean, if they want to go ahead and stay at the 4 years, would they be willing to do 4 at 25 for 100 million? Is that something that Josh Giddey is willing to do and leave 50 million on the table? I mean, I think that that's something that we're going to find out about once the negotiations ultimately get done here. And I think that the other option that Josh Giddey obviously has is that he can go to his qualifying offer of $11.1 million. But here's what I find interesting about this qualifying offer situation. And so I got a chance to look at this over the weekend here, and this was written by Elias Schuster. But within this article, it takes you to a tweet from Bobby Marks, who's on ESPN. He's the guy that talks about the Caps, and he also was a GM at one point as well. But he talks about what it's been like for players who have gone out and taken the qualifying offer here. And so, according to Bobby Marks, it has not been pretty for players who have played on the qualifying offer and then look to get a good contract after that. In fact, he says that it really has only worked out well for Miles Bridges here. And so you can see out of the 5 players here, Miles Bridges seems to be the player that has come out on top. And so not saying that, this is going to happen to Josh Giddey. I hope whatever happens, it's for the better for him. If he's going to play on the qualifying offer, sure. If he's going to go ahead and ultimately get a deal with the Chicago Bulls, I hope that it works out. And so, I just think that if he's going to play on the qualifying offer here, he's definitely betting on himself. And I mean, he does have options in the sense that he can veto trades, but he would be hurting himself if he does decide to go ahead and say, hey, I want to be traded to this team, because that would waive his bird rights, which means that a team is not going to be able to go over the salary cap to pay him. And so hopefully the Chicago Bulls and Josh Giddey are able to come to some type of conclusion here and get this done. I do believe that AK wants Josh Giddey here. I think that when you look at the way the Chicago Bulls changed the offense up and just really how him and Kobe White really found the rhythm here towards the end of the year and what the offense looked like, I do think that AK and this front office want to build upon that. And that means that you would bring back your lead guard in Josh Giddey. And so let's see how this thing shakes out. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys are thinking about this most current update around Josh Giddey. And so next, I wanted to talk about the most recent trade buzz around both Ayo Dosunmu and Johnathan Kuminga. And so let's start with Johnathan Kuminga. And so before we go ahead and we jump into this, before we get to the Chicago Bulls part about Johnathan Kuminga, Brett Siegel does say a couple different things that I find interesting here. And so number one, he talks about Johnathan Kuminga. He wants to be a starter and believes that he's a star and believes that his role is going to be limited in Golden State. Next, he talks about the Heat and the Nets. Those were teams that were reported to have some interest out there along with the Chicago Bulls. And he says that they didn't really go after Johnathan Kuminga. He also gives us a little bit of an update here around the Sacramento Kings. He says that deal probably has the ship has sailed on that deal, mainly just saying that they really weren't interested in maybe the piece that the Sacramento Kings wanted to send over. I believe Devin Carter was the player listed into that. And then that's where he goes into the part about the Chicago Bulls here. And so this is what he says about Johnathan Kuminga and that situation. And then we'll talk here right now about Ayo Dosunmu as well. And so he says that leaves the Chicago Bulls, which is another team that was rumored to have interest in Johnathan Kuminga, which that's something that we have constantly been talking about here. And then he says that the Warriors are still holding out belief that they can get a sign and trade done with the Bulls. And then again, Chicago has its own problems to figure out with Giddey. Before they can think about pursuing Kuminga, the Bulls will need to come to terms in a new deal with Giddey first, since they are hard capped at the first apron. And he says that it's been made clear that the Chicago Bulls have no interest in trading Kobe White, and it's unlikely the Golden State Warriors would pursue Nikola Vucevic in a sign and trade for Kuminga, sources said. Now, this is where he talks about Ayo Dosunmu. He said that Ayo Dosunmu is a key name to keep an eye on, not just for the Warriors, but who have been interested in him previously, or not just to the Golden State Warriors who have been interested in him previously, but other teams around the league as well. There has been plenty of interest in Dosunmu as he enters the final year of his contract. All right, and so there is, just the most recent update here around Johnathan Kuminga, and then also to Ayo Dosunmu. And so, let's start with the Johnathan Kuminga situation. And so we had heard a report that suggested that Johnathan Kuminga and his camp was pushing to get over to Chicago and somehow try to find a way to where him and Josh Giddey could get paid. I think that that would be an interesting scenario. And I wonder if that is something that Johnathan Kuminga is still pushing for, because, if it is true, which I really do believe that is probably where Johnathan Kuminga is at as far as wanting to be a starter and then also to wanting to reach for his star potential, then when you look at Chicago, I think it would be a destination for him to definitely have that runway to find himself out here. Is he a perfect player? Absolutely not. But he does check a lot of what the front office is looking for when you're looking for a younger player that has some upside. He's a champion in the NBA as well, and he can score the basketball. I think that really he leaves a little bit to be desired with rebounding the basketball and also to defensively, and just can he play off ball? And so I think you put him in an up-tempo style of play, you get him to learn how to play off ball. And obviously, he needs to buy in defensively, because I definitely think he has the skill set to be good defensively. But again, you just really don't know what he has unless he gets thrust into that role. And so I do think that it would be a good fit here. I just think that it's going to be tougher now for this to get done, because the Chicago Bulls went out and they got Isaac Okoro. They also drafted Noah Asingay. And if Noah Asingay definitely shows some signs like Modest Bazelis here, you got to think about, okay, from a development standpoint, you have Johnathan Kuminga. You also have Patrick Williams on the roster, which I don't see him going anywhere at this point in time, especially with the way his play was last season. I think that when you add more players in, there's a chance that the value on him could even go down more, because he could lose more playing time there. And so, that's a situation where you have a roster spot tied up at the wing position. And so, the Bulls could make it work, but it would be tricky. And then when you look at the fact that if you were looking to move off of Ayo Dosunmu for Johnathan Kuminga, I mean, you could get it done, but keep in mind that you're losing one of your better defenders, if not the best defender on the team. I think between him and Isaac Okoro, those guys are set to lock up a lot of people on the defensive end. And I just don't trust Patrick Williams and what he can do defensively at this point, especially when he took the step back. I mean, he definitely has shown in the past he can do it, but we don't know what's going to happen this season, especially adding, more players and things like that. And so, Ayo Dosunmu, we know he brings it every time on the court on both ends of the floor. He's definitely a player that I've said several times, man, this is a guy that is a one-man fast break out there. He wants to make the right plays. You love who he is as a team leader. I think between him and Kobe White, these guys want all the smoke, and I love it with Ayo Dosunmu. And so I'm not in the camp of moving off of either, but I think it would be an interesting scenario if that is what the Bulls are thinking about. And I almost wonder, is this something that AK is taking seriously? Like, is he maybe thinking that he wants to get Josh Giddey in and he would try to pursue Johnathan Kuminga? I really wonder if that's something that this front office is thinking about. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what you guys are thinking about this most recent, trade buzz here around Johnathan Kuminga. Do you think that this is something that the Bulls should explore as far as going out there and looking to get Johnathan Kuminga and then trying to find a way to get a Josh Giddey, Josh Giddey and him together on a team? Do you think that this is something where you find it interesting that Ayo Dosunmu is not just linked to the Golden State Warriors, but continues to be linked to multiple teams? And so I thought that that was interesting as well, because that kind of ties into what we had heard before, that there's more trade buzz around Ayo Dosunmu than there is around Kobe White. And so that is going to be something I think worth monitoring here. And then lastly, what do you guys think about this latest update around Josh Giddey, as it looks like that there is still a big gap here? And so if this report is true, that the Bulls are only looking to do 4 years at $20 million. Once again, that is $80 million. And for the entirety of the contract, you look at what Josh Giddey is, rumored to be looking for. Again, we haven't heard it from him. We continue to keep hearing his camp for the $30 million per year. So 5 times the 30, that's $150 million. And I'm asking the question, what do you guys think about 4 years at $25 million? That give him $100 million there on total on the contract. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you're thinking. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.